Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody else in between, this is Ashton Gene Lewis. You are, well, we're not on the actual just regular podcast. This is part of our YouTube series called the Exit Interviews, where we either talk to a player or we talk to a media member about an NFL team. We've already got one in the books so far. We got Karen Garegian from the Boston Herald. She's been on the beat for 15 years, been working, and I guess our guest who's on here today, she's been working at the Boston Herald, one of the most famous newspapers on the planet, for 34 years. It's crazy to think about because, you know, women in sports has been kind of a tenuous thing when it comes to sports. Our guest today, Joe George. Some of you are very familiar with him because you listen to him on Sports Talk 790. Others of you have seen him on this here podcast a couple of times. But what up, Joe? How's it going?
What's up, man? Good, man. How are you? It's good to see you.
It is good to see you too, man. I know you're busy, and as every time you come on this show, we have to talk about something else that you are adding into your repertoire of things doing. The last time you were on this show, I don't think your kid was born, so now
I don't think so.
Your dad is going to be added to the resume there, but then we also have you've gotten your own show now, man. You went from producing the A-Team, and now you got your own show, Overtime. How's that going so far?
Yeah, man, it's good. So I'm still producing the A-Team, Monday through Friday, from 3 to 6 on 790, and I'm doing Overtime from 7 to 9 whenever there's no Astros, Rockets, or like UT games. So, it's sometimes one show a week, 4 shows a week, but we're in week 2 now. I think it's going pretty well so far. I'm pretty happy with it, but yeah, man, it's exciting. I mean, I was doing some stuff on the weekends before,
right?
But this is, it's nice to be on, during the week, multiple shows a week, and just be doing something that's really my own, and it's definitely very exciting, for sure.
No doubt about that, man, and couldn't be more happy to have you on the show. Sadly, we do have to talk about, let's be honest, some sad/funny things that are going on. I would like to start off the interview. Of course, you're here to talk about the Chicago Bears and the Houston Texans. Now, you're a media member in the Houston, Texas media market. What is it, 3rd or 4th in the country right now?
I think it's 4th, maybe 5th.
Yeah. So we get it confused all the time because it's like Chicago and Houston kind of flip back and forth or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is strange to say because Joe will tell you, like the radio stations in Chicago, they do not change. Like, they don't change at all. They are very reluctant to changing lineups, how they do things, what time shows go on, all that kind of stuff like that. In Houston, it seems like all the time we're dealing with like guys like Nick Wright who come in for a couple years and now he's on FS1 on a regular basis. Guys like you who went from ESPN 97.5 over to 790, and a bunch of people that we know that go in and out of the market all the time. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, this market's crazy, man. You see, I think I'm the latest person that's worked at like every single station in the market because I had like a year stint at 610
right
as well before I got to 790. So it's like there's a bunch of us now at this point, it seems like, who have worked everywhere. So it's definitely like a very different market in terms of that. Like, where like Chicago is like very like kind of set with their lineups, and when they do make changes, like they're also like big splashes too.
Yeah,
like it's like big things are happening if there's a change.
They write articles about when new hosts show up in Chicago. They do not when in Houston, or they're not as popular. But yeah, we got a lot to talk about. But first, I'd like to take a second and for us to audibly laugh for at least 3 seconds at the Dallas Cowboys fans out there. So ha 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 ha. You guys legitimately thought you had it, and I did too for a second. After week 1 of the season, when they were cooking against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they lost by a field goal. I was like, this is the best Cowboys team we've seen in like 5 years, man. So it felt pretty good. But as usual, leave it to Kellen Moore. I feel like Kellen Moore is like really skating hard right now, and I don't.
Dude, I think so too. Like, he's getting like a free pass. Like, everyone's looking at Mike McCarthy. It's like, if you're gonna blame someone, it's like McCarthy 1, Dak 2, Kellen Moore 3. He's out here getting interviews for head coaching jobs, and I'm like, I don't think there's any clarification like who made that final call. I heard something today like there was 2 plays called, like, because like you can see like one of the wide receivers is still running a route and not aware of the draw, but like that whole like that whole like exchange at the end is just, it's honestly, I think it's just like total malpractice for like what is happening like for a coach. The fact that they say they practice that and they practice it that way, to me, it's just like, it's just insane. It's an all-time bad play call. Because even like Mike McCarthy's reasoning in his last press conference was, and we knew like we had like 14 seconds.
Right.
That play call was 13 seconds. So what that means, though,
there's no room for error whatsoever.
Yeah, with 1 second left on the clock, they're going to snap the ball and try to score a touchdown from 27 yards away or whatever it was. and you just have one chance. Like, dude, just throw 3 Hail Marys. Your odds are way better. The 49ers had the most pass interference plays in the NFL this season. Like, just throw the Hail Mary. Like, you never know what's going to – you could get a play at the 1-yard line and easily win this game, and then they did this dumb decision. It's an all-time bad move.
And to be honest with you, with the way that the D-line was playing for the 49ers, I am thoroughly surprised that Dak was able to get that many yards out of that play because shout out DJ Jones. Always got to represent for the big dudes up front. DJ Jones was on fire that entire game, despite the fact that Joey Bosa ended up not finishing the game because of a concussion or whatever. The rest of the D-line was cooking, and you could see it in the way that they were running the ball. Like, there was very few times where Tony Pollard, who's been amazing throughout the course of this season, was able to even get wiggle room to get away from him. So, but yeah, the 3 Hail Marys gives you a better chance against, even though the 49ers defense has been amazing, like vast majority of the season, you talk about the pass interference calls for sure, and it's because they play high-quality wide receivers on a regular basis. By the way, shout out to the NFC West, absolutely beasting in the first round of the playoffs, and also shout out to Cliff Kingsbury, who sounds like he's going to be needing a new job here pretty soon. So yeah, he can't handsome his way out of this one, guys. But
I would be out on that guy if I was a Cardinals fan. Out on Cliff Kingsbury.
Well, my thing is like they faded later into the season. You know what I mean? Last time it was like Kyler got the ankle injury, and it was like the halfway point of the year. And then when he came back, they immediately looked like a totally different team, and they didn't even compete for the playoffs. But they kind of held it together a little bit. Shout out Colt McCoy for being able to somehow pull off 2 divisional wins. And then, of course, you can only expect like 2 good games out of any backup quarterback. Anything beyond that, you're talking about like all-time great backup QBs, like Ryan Fitzpatrick type territory. But yeah, it was really weird, man. It was the same thing that happened like last year, but just like later into the season. At least they were able to make the playoffs. But yeah, he'll find a new job. They always do. They always land on their feet. That's just how it goes.
That's true. I think Brian Kelly still needs an OC at LSU. So if he loses his job, I wouldn't be shocked if he comes calling.
Look, man, I'm sure Lincoln Riley's on the phone. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
He's got to be. They got a chance to, if they can get those guys away that are going to Oregon back to USC, they got a chance. But other than that, we talk about that a little bit, but we got 2 teams that were nowhere near the playoffs at any point during this season. Well, I take that back. There was 1 point. The Texans were 1-0 on the season, and hope springs eternal. But anyway, so who do you want to talk about first, man? The Colts, or I'm sorry, the Bears or the Texans?
Let's sit with the Bears first.
All right, so we got a team that is looking for a new head coach.
Yep.
And the search has been interesting because basically everybody's interviewing the same exact people, so that's fun. If you are a head coaching candidate, do you take the Bears job?
Yeah, I think the Bears job is good. Obviously, I would not take the job, honestly. If I was a GM, I would not take the job if they hired a coach first, and vice versa, because like you got to be lockstep with GM and coach, and that's why I think like the Bears are like taking their sweet time. They're interviewing like 1 GM candidate a day. They have like 12 guys requested, but they brought in Matt Eberflus, the DC from Indianapolis, for a second head coaching interview. So it's really weird that they're doing all these coaching interviews and GM interviews simultaneously, where like the Giants are more just doing, all their GM interviews first, and then they're going to move on. And I just, that would be like my only concern. I'm a big Justin Fields believer. I loved him out of the draft. I thought he was the second best quarterback in this draft, honestly. And I think there's like this stretch from like the Pittsburgh game on Monday Night Football before he gets injured, where if you're a believer in Pro Football Focus, they have him graded really highly. And I think just Matt Nagy's offense is absolutely terrible. He has no idea what he's doing as a coach in the NFL, in my opinion. And I'd really like to see what Justin would look like with a new coach, and also like with a group of wide receivers that are fully committed to playing for the Bears, because you could see constantly throughout the season, especially towards the back end, that Allen Robinson.
I was about to say.
He wasn't even trying, dude. This guy is like, I'm not going to get the ball, and they should have gotten the ball, but like they should have just given Justin Fields, the ball from day one, instead of trying to do this Andy Dalton thing. Just let him go out there and get his lumps and teach him the offense from the beginning. And they just seem hesitant to do that. So I still think it's a really good job, but I think it honestly, if you don't believe in Justin Fields, that's not the job for you. It starts and ends there for me.
So I have to ask the question: what did you feel like? By the way, Joe's qualifications of talking about the Bears comes from the fact that he is born and raised Chicagoan. So
Yes.
yeah, he is through and through. He suffered through a lot. He witnessed the greatness. What was it? I saw you the day that the Cubs won the World Series. It was a huge life moment. Yeah, we were all at work. It was pretty wild. Heard all the crazy stories and stuff like that. But yeah, Joe is Chicago through and through, which is why I'm talking to him about the Bears. It comes from a fan perspective, and then from the Texans perspective, it's like a media thing. But the Bears overall, man, before this season started, were we what did you feel like the expectations from like not only fans but like for you personally as a guy who does this for a living and then watches football and gets paid to do it? You know what I mean? A little different.
Honestly, like I expected a little bit. I expected it to be bumpy from Justin Fields, yes, but looking at their schedule and knowing that they made the playoffs last year with Mitch Trubisky and Nick Foles as the quarterbacks, like I thought the expectation would be to at least be 500 or I guess you can't be 500 anymore. Get close to the playoffs. Like Justin is a better quarterback probably already in the NFL than Mitch Trubisky ever was, and like it was like that was the expectation, and of at least get close again because like you were just there last year, and like the idea that that the Eagles got in, and honestly they didn't beat anyone of any consequence this entire season. Like the Bears should have been much more competitive this year, but they took a huge step back, and honestly I think it's for the betterment of the franchise because this franchise is going nowhere with Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy in charge. So it's in a weird way, like it was. I'm glad they didn't because I think if they would have made the playoffs with Fields, they would have gave Nagy and Pace an extension, which honestly just would have been a detriment to the franchise. So this is probably best case scenario, honestly, for the Bears.
Man, I can't imagine what that conversation would have to be like. Be like, I mean, are we going to keep these guys? It's like, hey, look, just because good things happen doesn't mean that they are a product of the people who are in charge. There's a lot of teams that overcame their, like the Eagles, for instance. A lot of their games were close when they just refused to run the ball earlier in the season, and that was a product of the fact that they're an immensely talented team. But nonetheless, before we switch over to the Texans, because I know you got to go here pretty soon, Allen Robinson, gone?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Gone. Like,
I'm surprised he played this season, let's be for real.
Yeah, I think, especially the way he played, like he just didn't. It's like he didn't play hard at all. I think he's definitely gone, and he should get a decent contract because Devontae Adams is a free agent, Chris Godwin's a free agent, and then Allen Robinson. So I think he clearly fits as like that number 3 guy. And if Adams doesn't get the franchise tag or Godwin, like if either of them sign big contracts, that'll set the bar for him. But I think when you look at the cap space in the NFL, someone's going to go out there and they're going to pay Allen Robinson. Mm-hmm. And I'll be really curious, like what his decision is. I have this feeling he's not going to want to, like he could go home to Jacksonville where he was drafted, and like they have the most cap space in the NFL. I think still, like that could make a lot of sense. But I think it's more like maybe he takes a little bit less money and he goes to Kansas City, something like that, and really becomes like their number 2 across the middle option, especially the way defenses are playing them this year, like not letting Tyreek beat them over the top. Going out and spending the money on someone like Allen Robinson makes a ton of sense. I think he's for sure gone. I would be stunned if he came back to Chicago at this point.
Yeah, I just didn't. There were a lot of people who were trying to convince themselves that he was going to make something, that he was going to try and stick around if they played well. And my argument was like, I mean, guys, like last season, he was like midway through the year, and he was like, I'm out of this place. Like, I'm demanding a trade as soon as possible. And like I said before, I'm shocked that he even played this year. So let's talk about one of the strangest situations in the NFL right now, the Houston Texans. They accidentally assembled a decent defense, and that kept them in way too many games. They are in a situation where they have a rookie quarterback who technically beat out Tyrod Taylor. I guess we can talk about that being a situation. By the way, you feel bad for Tyrod? Like at this point, it keeps happening.
Well, like this year, he didn't get, he got the job back after he got hurt.
Right, and then he lost it.
And he was terrible. And it's like, and honestly, Davis Mills was a much better quarterback this year. Like, I don't think he's great by any means. But like, I think Davis Mills played well enough to me. Like when you look at this draft class, and you look at the free agency class and where they're at with Deshaun Watson, Davis Mills should 110% be the quarterback next year. Nick Caserio's first ever draft pick as a Texans GM was Davis Mills in the 3rd round last year. He played statistically. He was the 2nd best rookie quarterback in the NFL. The only problem I have with Davis Mills is that they didn't score points. He had some good stats, but they were only averaging 19 points a game when he's starting. That's a huge problem. But David Shaw came on. This head coach at Stanford came on our show, the A-Team, the day after,
right.
The Monday after Davis Mills was drafted, and look, it's coach speak probably, but he still stands on this that Davis Mills would have been a top 15 pick in this year's NFL draft.
Right.
He stayed. So look, he's a
Joe. Let's be for real.
Recruit.
Yeah, let's be for real. Allegedly the QB class this year is ass.
Oh, I don't know if it's ass, but it's not. If you're the Texans and you have the 3rd pick, and you're the Lions, you have the 2nd pick. There's not a quarterback of that quality.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of teams out here who they should be thankful that they don't have to get pressured media-wise into being we need to take a chance on one of these quarterbacks.
But I think it's interesting for teams like the Steelers. Matt Corral could be sitting there.
Good luck, Kenny Pickett.
It's
all you, buddy.
Kenny Pickett could end up in Washington at 11. I think that's where the quarterbacks someone will rise or trade up for a quarterback because they're desperate. But this is not a top 5 guy for me in this draft, and that's where Davis Mills I think just played well enough, and 5-star prospect out of high school, because of injuries and a COVID shortened season and for the Pac-12, he only started 13 games in college.
Right.
So I would just run with him next year, and then if you really suck, then you have Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud sitting there at the top of next year's draft, and you're okay, well we're good, or you're gonna have a ton of draft capital potentially from a Deshaun Watson trade. There's just way more flexibility going to 2023 than 2022.
As a defense guy, if they can get their hands on Will Anderson, I will be a very happy camper.
Dude, that would be tough. It's if the number 1 pick in the draft next year and you need a quarterback, Will Anderson is the best player in college football.
Right.
By far. Right now, he would be the number 1 pick in this year's draft. He's definitely going to be the number 1 pick next year.
Yeah.
He probably won't be because of Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud. But, dude, that's where it's if Davis Mills plays decent and you still don't win a lot of games, it would be. I think it's going to be tough to pass up Will Anderson, who's going to be a generational talent in the NFL.
Yeah, well, if you're wondering what the draft is looking like, it's Aiden Hutchinson and that Godot kid from Oregon that are probably going to be, or what's his name, Evan Neal, right?
Evan Neal makes a lot of sense. That's not how you say his name. The tackle from NC State.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
But both those make a lot of sense. Honestly, I wouldn't hate. I mean, it's a safety, but I think Kyle Hamilton is a special player. I would think that'd be a fine pick. I think.
Or San Diego State kicker, the greatest of all time.
It's true.
Have you?
I don't know. It's gonna be interesting, man. I'm really curious, what the Texans are gonna do in the draft. I think there's actually, though, I do think there's a chance, they're gonna end up with Hutchinson or Thibodeau from Oregon. I think Jacksonville could take a left tackle first overall. I think I wouldn't rule out the Lions taking a reach at Kenny Pickett, and honestly, I still wouldn't rule out the Texans taking a reach at Kenny Pickett or Matt Corral. I think it'd be a mistake, but it wouldn't shock me.
I would like to have a draft where they go for a skill position. Nico Holland's paying out really well. Brandon Cooks is allegedly staying. More offensive linemen. You can never have too many good offensive linemen. You can never have too many tackles in the NFL, as we learned when we lost, left tackle early on in the season. How many times? Alex Leatherwood started off the year as a tackle for the Raiders and ended up moving in the guard and playing a lot better. It's not. You can never have too many good offensive linemen. But what do I know? I'm just a dude that talking to a microphone.
I agree with you, though.
Yeah. So, Joe, to finish this one off, man, of course the regular season was honestly, not a massive disappointment for Texans fans because they thought they were going winless this year. Yeah. They legitimate. Well, my thing was with Tyrod, you're going to have a lot of chances in a lot of games, and that just didn't turn out that way. Defense played spectacular overall, but the offseason, man, if you're a fan, do you actually expect the Texans to be a mover in terms of free agency, especially considering all these dudes from 2019 are about to be off the roster? So
no, I don't. I mean, I think honestly, it's hard to overstate, or it's easy to overstate how the importance of these next 3 months. But If the Texans are ever going to become a winning franchise again, I think the next 3 months are going to be some of the most important months in the history of this franchise. I mean, you got to get your head coach hire right. You know, you fired David Culley after a year. You got to get your coach right.
By the way, fair or not fair, I don't think Dave Culley did anywhere near a job of a person who gets fired after 1 year.
I don't think he deserved to be a coach in the NFL. So
wow. I saw him get better.
He's a wide receiver coach. Like,
yeah. I saw him get better as the season went on because the same guy who was like punting on 4th and 1 in tenuous situations started going for it. But I do get you in the situation. He's like, it takes an experienced coach to be able to deal with a team that is intentionally tanking, obviously, or in some people's case in a rebuild. But what's the difference?
I mean, look, he's in his 60s. He's never interviewed for a head coaching position in the NFL. He's never been an offensive coordinator, never been a defensive coordinator. It was probably a bad hire from the beginning. I think my counterpoint to you would be, it's documented that Nick Caserio GM is telling him what to do in his headset, telling him to let the Patriots score. So it's like, it's hard to differentiate what's his and what's not. So like, to me, like, it was a bad hire from the beginning. Like, Urban Meyer was a bad hire because you knew it was going to be a disaster.
Right.
David Culley's a bad hire because it didn't make any sense for the future of your franchise. So you got to get the coach right. You got to get the 3rd pick in the draft right. And honestly, you gotta cross your fingers and hope that all this legal stuff kind of goes away or is cleaned up a little bit for Deshaun Watson, and then try to get 2-3 first-round picks for him, and then really set your franchise in a positive direction. But it's just like, it's a lot. Some of the biggest issues they have, like, it starts with Watson, and like that's just all out of their hands, frankly.
Yeah. So Joe, he's got 22 cases. You think he's shooting 100% from the field on that?
I think that we should know here soon. I think it's by the end of the month. We'll know if there's going to be criminal charges.
There's one criminal charge, right?
There's a grand jury.
Yeah.
So there's a grand jury that's like, they're going over the evidence to decide if there's going to be enough evidence to proceed with criminal.
Yeah.
Everything I've read makes it sound like that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, well, legally, when you're a sports fan, sad to say, you have to actually be like kind of an expert in legalese type stuff. It's he said, she said type situation. So like, unless there's actual video evidence of it going on, you can't bring that in the court, because you asked the question of like, whose word is more valuable? Why is that person more valuable than this person if they're both human beings? And then you start to get into whatever. Anyway,
sure. And then but honestly, dude, I think at some point, I think Deshaun Watson is going to settle all 22 cases. He's going to be deposed over 10 days, starting at the end of February and early March. And there was a leak of $100,000 offer to one of the women. I honestly I think he's going to settle. I think it's going to end up being a lot more than what he's expecting. The only holdup I think here is that I do believe, we've had multiple reports that Deshaun Watson wants non-disclosure agreements with all these cases, in terms of money, in terms of I can't talk about it anymore if I was Deshaun Watson. The women can't talk about it, but no one can talk about it. I think that would be the only holdup. But even then, dude, honestly, we see guys go to jail, guys get arrested, and they're back in the NFL. It's 22 civil cases, but Deshaun Watson to me is going to play in the NFL next year. He might get suspended, but he's gonna play next year. I think for sure. I just don't know. I think we should wait and see where it's at. But that's where the Texans they're just in this weird spot because honestly, my opinion is screw that guy. He signed a contract. He's clearly a weird dude, if not just a bad dude. Clearly with all this masseuse stuff, he's got poor judgment at the absolute minimum for inviting women that he's never met over on Instagram to his house, going to their house for massages, and then it's just weird.
Especially since we know the habits of athletes, they do not like to change up people who deal with their body, knowing how much their body is worth.
Can I tell you something? One thing I found really interesting, and there's never been follow up, but it's undeniable fact that the first reported case, when you look at the timeline, the first allegation is within 7 days of the city of Houston going into lockdown for COVID in 2020, and the NFL facilities shutting down.
Right.
So it's I don't know what that means, but there's this weird thing where it's the world shuts down, And then like Deshaun Watson, like all these allegations start immediately after that. There's nothing before. There's nothing from college. There's nothing pre-COVID-19 shutdown. It's so weird, and like I don't know where we're going with like where this all plays out in the end. But I think the biggest question for like if you're a Texans fan, if like you're hoping Deshaun Watson gets traded, is like can they legally get this wrapped up before the NFL draft? If it's not, that's where I think things get like a lot more complicated.
Yeah. And then of course the question is the secret suspension real? Because that's why he wasn't activated this entire season.
Honestly, I think he just hates the Texans and didn't want to play here. I think it's just like Ben Simmons. Like I think it's no different.
Right.
I think he didn't want to play here and they wanted to trade him. And I think if Deshaun Watson would have had his legal situation figured out in the season, they would have traded him. But like it's just he didn't want to be here, honestly.
And honestly, man, we all understand that was his stance a while ago, and it has been for a while, and it's understandable in certain situations for sure, because we've all seen Bill O'Brien coach. We've all seen, for as many good things you can say about Bill O'Brien as a coach, there's a lot of bad things you can say as well in terms of how he runs a team. And on that note, Joe, I know you got to go, man. I appreciate you coming on the show, man.
Of course, dude.
No doubt. Make sure you guys check him out on Sports Talk 790. Follow Joe on Twitter so he can get that clout. He needs that clout. He's got a baby to feed, so help him get that IG clout so he can start selling that fit team. So you can lose 2 pounds in 1 week, right? At Joe George Radio. Make sure you check him out. Appreciate you for coming on the show, bro.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
No doubt.